Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back, and today we're going to do One Piece chapter 1068 review. Let's get into it. The title of this chapter, A Genius's Dream. Let's start off with the cover page. Looks like Caesar and Judge are still fighting and brawling over them not knowing each other, I guess. But looks like they're slowly remembering. They have like a joined thought bubble of what happened in the past. And we also have like two silhouettes in the background. I'm not sure if these silhouettes are supposed to be them, and then the guy in the middle is Vegapunk. And I'm not sure if Oda's referencing that the two silhouettes are Caesar and Judge, and he just doesn't want to reveal their old designs yet until Vegapunk's flashback. But I think this is very interesting, and I'm excited and hyped for this Mads flashback. Opening up the chapter, we see Pythagoras talking to CP0, and he's basically denying them entry, and he's just like, yo, just give us the Seraphim Kuma and you guys can bounce, you know what I'm saying? And right as Pythagoras is telling them this, Lucci is already realizing that Vegapunk is probably suspicious of CP0 and why they came. And to be fair, CP0 came in just damaging their CBs and beating them up, so it's kind of obvious that they're there for a different reason than just returning the S-Bear. CP0 is here to take someone out, right? And I think they're making it pretty obvious. The funny part is where Kaku is like, yo, it's been a long journey, can we just stop by for some tea real quick? And Pythagoras is quick to mention that G14 is not too far from here. So Oda is just basically trying to plant the seed again for G14 to come back into this arc. So we haven't had really a reason to even think about why G14 would be related to what we're doing right now. So obviously Oda is going to loop this back in somehow. As we're getting into this chapter, we see that the Straw Hats are very one-sided, and it seems like, honestly, the Straw Hats are going to win easily, right? They have a Yonko on their side. They got a bunch of Seraphim on their side. So it doesn't seem like, honestly, the Straw Hats could lose in this situation. And obviously Oda is trying to play us here. He's trying to do something where there's going to be something unexpected happening. Everything in this arc has been moving very smoothly so far, so I think Oda is kind of setting us up to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna freaking own CP0, we have the Seraphim on our side, who's gonna really beat us? Somehow G14 has to get involved, so maybe the Straw Hats are going to be under some intense situations. G14 is going to have to come in, help us, and maybe we're gonna get a cool reunite between the Straw Hat and Smoker and Tashigi. Also see some interaction between Luffy and potentially X-Drake. Continuing on, Luffy questions Vegapunk about the disappearances of the CP5, CP7, and CP8 ships as they haven't returned. And Vegapunk obviously denies this, so I'm actually wondering what happened to these ships. Did someone get involved where they're slowly taking out these ships one by one? Is Lilith Vegapunk actually responsible for this, right? So has she been taking out these CP5, 7, and 8 ships, right? And she just hasn't been telling us this entire time. I mean, she did, want to offer up the Straw Hats right away to CP0, so it doesn't make sense why she'd be friendly with them if she was taking him out. She ends up just straight up denying this, and she's like, why would we ever be involved with, disappearing these organizations' ships, right? After the exchange with Vegapunk, and Vegapunk did not allow CP0 to dock, Lucci gives up on the ship, and he's just like, yo, let's sacrifice the ship since the CBs are going to take it out anyway. Let's use the Seraphim Kuma's ability of the Pawpaw Fruit. So it's confirmed that the Seraphim Kuma has the Pawpaw Fruit, and as this is all happening, we quickly shift to Kamabaka Island, and we see Kuma running off, and all of a sudden using his ability and blasting off Kamabaka Island and flying somewhere. All everyone is assuming is that he's going to pull up onto Egghead Island. A lot of people were saying potentially it would take him like 3 days to come to Egghead Island. I'm not as well versed with why this would be, because obviously the distance is probably pretty far. Maybe it is 3 days worth of distance, but I'm guessing on how Kuma's ability could work since he's using it on himself. He can just apply his Pawpaw power more than once, right? So if he's applying it consistently over a time period, he can basically accelerate and get there within a really short amount of time, rather than the long period of time we saw with when he launched off the Straw Hats to different places. So I think Kuma is going to pull up, and I think if there's a battle between the Seraphim Kuma and, regular Kuma, I think that would be pretty sick and a really interesting battle. I also want to mention here, since we have confirmed now that the Pawpaw Fruit is used by the Seraphim Kuma, we can safely assume that the Boa Hancock Seraphim also probably has her ability. So maybe she can, turn everyone into stone in this scenario. Another question I had is that Boa Hancock's ability leans towards that person being beautiful, right? And so how beautiful do we consider a child? This Seraphim is a child version of her, and she's clearly less, I would say less attractive, because I don't know if you want to be attracted to a child, right? I wonder how the efficacy of her fruit will go down, most likely. Another thing people were throwing out there is potentially if the Straw Hats really get drawn into a corner, Bonnie can use her ability and age up the Seraphims that are, working on our side. I'm also wondering what fruit they could have potentially give him the Mihawk Seraphim. And we didn't see anything with the Mihawk Seraphim since it was basically just his sword. But since the Jinbei Seraphim did have that Swim fruit, maybe they gave something to the Mihawk Seraphim, and I'm wondering if it just might be OP. What if they gave the Mihawk Seraphim like Trafalgar Law's Devil Fruit, right? Let's say they gave him the Api Api no Mi. So Seraphim Mihawk is having Law's hacked abilities along with Mihawk's sword abilities. That would be absolutely insane, and I would love to see Zoro go against this Seraphim Mihawk. It would literally be a preview of the final battle, and I think Oda literally has to do it. And in the next part we see, this is right after Vegapunk asks Luffy to take him off the island, and Luffy's basically questioning him, hey old man, like why do you want to leave the island? Isn't your lab here? And this gets Vegapunk into talking about his dream. And Vegapunk states his dream here, I want to make a world where free energy is available to all. And Luffy immediately counters, yo old man, that's great to hear that you want to give free energy to everybody, but I'm not in it to be a hero. And this is like a common thing Oda keeps bringing up, where Luffy doesn't want to be recognized as a hero. I think the difference in ideology that we're seeing here is how Vegapunk wants to help on a global scale. He wants to help everyone, and as we saw with Luffy, his dream is more scoped out to his friends. He's more focused on his friends, like he said to Kaido. Luffy states he wants a world where my friends can eat as much as they like. Luffy is very much focused more on his friends, and that's why I think he views himself as a pirate, where he's not really worried about other people, he's worried about the people he cares about. The biggest counterpoint to this as well is what Mihawk said at Marineford. That man possesses the most terrifying power. One by one, he turns the people around him into his allies. So what's really funny is that even though Luffy is more focused on only helping his friends, what ends up happening is that he can make anyone his friend, and he'll make everyone his friend at the end of the day. When he becomes Pirate King, everyone will love him and cherish him and believe in him as a hero. It's a classic paradigm you see with a lot of people. I remember a clip with Israel Adesanya where he's just like, I'm not a role model. Right? He was telling Mike Tyson this, I'm not a role model. But it's really not up to him to decide, right? It's up to the fan. It's not up to Israel Adesanya to decide if he's a hero or not, if he's a role model or not. Because who's going to decide that? The people that love him, the fans that love him and cherish him. And so I think by the end of the story, Luffy will be a hero. Honestly, like at the end of the day, Luffy is a shonen, main character, right? So he honestly is a hero, by definition. When it's all said and done, I think Luffy will be viewed as a hero, as a god. He will be sun god Nika, and everyone will respect him for that. And as Luffy still wasn't understanding why energy is important or relevant at all, Jinbei actually clarifies to him, nations often wage war over the natural resources we need to generate energy. Oda really uses Jinbei as like a wise old man that kind of knows about everything here, and I'm wondering if he was doing some kind of foreshadowing on what actually happened between the Ancient Kingdom and the 20 Kingdoms, and I'm guessing it might have been a war over this infinite energy power source. And I'm just throwing this out there. Let's say the Ancient Kingdom had access to this infinite power source, and let's say these 20 kingdoms got access to this infinite power source as well, and basically there was a race to create these really, really powerful weapons, and it was just a weapons race. And so what ends up happening is that, both sides are kind of attacking each other, and then eventually, one side wins. They end up taking out the Lunarians, they end up taking out the Ancient Kingdom using these infinite power sources, and potentially maybe they got access to the ancient weapons. So once they defeated their enemy, they basically hid all these resources from the rest of the world, similar to how the US did with nuclear weapons, right? So with nuclear weapons, they initially developed the nuclear weapons, used them on Japan, and then banned anyone in the world to develop their own nuclear weapons, right? To prevent nuclear proliferation, right? So they didn't want anyone getting access to this crazy, crazy powerful stuff, because obviously it's dangerous. When you have access to these powerful weapons, you can upset the norm and, take down things that are bigger than you. So Vegapunk also says, he says that people need to open their eyes. There's energy all around it, right? So what is he referring to by this? Maybe it's light, maybe it's air. What is the world teeming with? I'm guessing the world is teeming with life, right? So maybe it's kind of one of these sources potentially. He continues on and says as well, if that raw power can be converted to a more apparent and accessible form, we'd never see another conflict spark up over it again. If this power source can get converted into something like, let's say, electricity, right, where you can create an electrical grid and get it out to, you know, millions and billions of people, then, you know, there's no war over energy anymore. Obviously, this is really utopian and this is really unlikely. The world has energy. There's always conflict. Humans are bound to divide between themselves, right? Find differences. We're built on finding differences between each other, but we bond on similarities. Let's say the battle over natural resources is over, you know, there's not really only wars on resources, you know, there could be wars about ideology, there could be wars on race, right? So there's a lot of different things that people could war about. And as Vegapunk is telling Luffy all of this, Luffy is still not buying it. Why does he want to leave? And Vegapunk gets into that his research into this infinite power source is actually what led the world government to want to exterminate him. And he actually gets into what was the source of him looking into this deeper. And after a dear friend of his died, he found himself diving deeper into an abyss to further his will. Vegapunk is actually a representation of inherited will, just like Luffy is, right? So he inherited this drive to look for this infinite power source from someone really close to him, and after that person passed away, that's when he got really, really deep into trying to solve this problem. And again, Oda is always looping inherited will back into this, and it's really awesome. And shifting back to CP0, CP0 finally pulls up onto Egghead, and Vegapunk seems to have processed all of what was going on. He basically inferred that they knew the sea beast would destroy the ship, so that's why they used the Seraphim Kuma to basically bounce to the island. So Vegapunk made a plan to deploy the S-Snake, S-Hawk, and S-Shark and put them under Sentomaru's command. And I wonder why Vegapunk put them under Sentomaru's command. Is Sentomaru loyal to Vegapunk, or is he willing to switch sides and work with CP0 and basically turn on all of us? And he also tells Atlas to come back to the lab, and as we see later, Atlas does not make it back to the lab. And quickly we shift back to Luffy and Vegapunk talking, and Luffy finally agrees to take Vegapunk off the island, but not for the reason you would expect. And Luffy says, I'll allow it though, since you've got a funny head. And if that's not pre-time skip Luffy, I don't know what is, you know what I'm saying? That's hilarious. And so Vegapunk says that they should head up to the lab stratum above the clouds, and they should bring Bonnie with them. And boom, he instantly teleports up to the lab, and he leaves them behind to catch up with him. And while all this is happening, Cypher Paul is fighting that gigantic monster hologram, and they don't realize it's a hologram yet until Stussy points it out. And it's very interesting how Stussy knows all this information about Egghead. As Rob Lucci praises her, you're as well versed as ever, Stussy. And Stussy says, yeah, it takes me back. So I wonder if Stussy actually grew up on the same island that Vegapunk grew up on, or is it possible that she visited Egghead before in the past? And she even knew about how the two lines on the cloud would actually send out a laser beam and attack you, right? And she says not to underestimate the greatest scientist on Earth. And it's hilarious how she just let Kaku just, you know, take the brunt of the attack without even warning him that there would be some kind of trap. Then all of a sudden, Atlas pulls up onto Rob Lucci instead of heading up to the lab. And Shaka is like, yo, you don't stand a chance, dude. What are you doing? And Rob Lucci is not messing around. He uses the Six King pistol and boom, takes out Atlas, and she is out, dude. Her face is shattered. Apparently she is still breathing though, so she looks like she could, you know, be out for the count here. I really don't know. And Rob Lucci really wasn't playing at all since he went directly into hybrid form, so he's ready to brawl. He's ready to take everyone out right here, right now. He's not even wasting a single second. And I love this last little panel here where Rob Lucci's like, straw hat. And Luffy's just looking over. He's like, what? Pigeon guy? What are you doing here, pigeon guy? Like, what? Did I take you out like years ago, 2 years ago? Like, how'd you end up here? You know what I'm saying? So this is going to be an epic rematch. I don't think Luffy's going to have that easy of a time, since now Rob Lucci seems like he is the leader of CP0 now, since the leader guy got taken out. So maybe that, since that leader guy is still alive, maybe he'll come back and replace Rob Lucci as the top guy. But I think for right now, Rob Lucci is the top guy of CP0, so he's nothing to mess around with. But obviously he's facing our boy Yonko, so I think something has to come into play where Luffy's going to be nerfed to some degree, or maybe he's just taken out of it altogether and Zoro fights Lucci, and maybe that actually will be a lot more interesting of a fight. But it's pure nostalgia. I even love how Oda drew Rob Lucci almost identical, and we saw some almost identical panels to how Oda's drawn him in the past, and it was just amazingly nostalgic to see them together again. Honestly, you know, one of the best fights in all of One Piece was this Rob Lucci fight, right? It was almost the first fight where Luffy had to go all out. He had to go completely all out, and it was a stretched out battle, just one singular battle where it's just going all the way to the end, and it's very, very even. So it would be really cool to see a battle like that again, but I'm really doubtful that's even possible here. So some final thoughts on this chapter. I just wanted to make a final little comparison between Vegapunk and Einstein. And as we've been discussing, Vegapunk has been wanting to look for an eternal flame or like a mini sun, and the only way this would be possible would be through nuclear fusion. And we understand nuclear fusion today in, you know, in our modern world through E=mc², obviously developed by Einstein, who Vegapunk is modeled after, and E=mc² eventually led into the atomic bomb. And obviously the atomic bomb is used in a little bit different way using nuclear fission, but obviously if we figured out nuclear fusion, we could probably create a bomb using nuclear fusion as well. But I think there actually is a greater point here to make. We saw with Einstein when he developed E=mc², and later on into World War II, he realized that there could actually be some very, very powerful weapons being created using this new information that he developed, right? This new formula that he developed actually opened it up to create these very, very powerful nuclear bombs. And so what Einstein ended up realizing is that maybe the Germans could develop these nuclear bombs, and that the US had to develop them faster than the Germans, right? Just so that they could neutralize the threat. And so Einstein went as far to send a letter to FDR back during World War II, urging FDR to actually create these nuclear weapons, since the Germans might already be on the way to creating them. And later Einstein references this letter and he says, "This is my one regret. I should not have sent this." What ended up happening is the Germans never actually figured out how to make these nuclear bombs. And so going back to what happens here in the One Piece story, I'm wondering if Vegapunk does figure out this infinite energy source, who's to say that, you know, both sides won't get access to this infinite energy source, you know, and end up destroying each other, right? And so this is again what I was talking about earlier, is that even though you will develop this crazy powerful technology, when you do develop it, you know, what are the consequences of it? Oda is in a unique situation here, as he lived in a country that actually got attacked by a nuclear bomb, obviously, and so I feel like he'll have a unique perspective on how to use these very dangerous and advanced technologies, you know, for mass destruction. So what if these are used for the wrong reasons, right? So Vegapunk's very focused on, oh, I want to give free energy out to the entire world. He's very focused on a utopian society where everyone has everything. However, the consequence of this is that that powerful technology gets into the hands of everyone, right? It gets into the hands of people that want to use it for malicious intent. And what are the dangers behind this technology, right? So for everything that you create, there is a consequence to that action. You know, Oda has a first-hand perspective, and Japanese people have a first-hand perspective on what that consequence is. I think Oda will definitely send a message to how you can kind of contain these issues, and how, I'm guessing, you know, the Straw Hats and potentially whatever world leaders after the Straw Hats take down the world government, how they'll handle keeping these weapons under wraps. And maybe it will be, again, you know, something like preventing nuclear proliferation, or preventing this specific technology, the infinite source, to get out. But yeah, that's basically all I had for this chapter. Let me know what you guys thought of this chapter down below in the comments, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.